Welcome back to the show. Cody Saftik, and I'm now joined on the line by Shaolin Shane Campbell, former Canadian Muay Thai champion, turned UFC lightweight. Shane, thanks for taking the time and dropping by the show today, man.
My pleasure.
You're back in action May 29th, taking on Erik Koch from Las Vegas on UFC Fight Night, Almeida versus Garbrandt. And, you know, a lot of the time when you see striker versus striker matchups, it very rarely ends up being a striking matchup. In this case, that's exactly what you got in front of you. Erik Koch comes from a long striking pedigree, being at a Duke Rufus' gym. You yourself come from a long striking pedigree as well. Do you anticipate this to be a striker versus striker matchup? It just ends up being a 3-round stand-up affair?
Well, I would sure hope so. For especially for the crowd's sake, but I do have an understanding that he's been training with Askren for the last couple of years, so probably having those newfound skills, he will want to try to get it to the ground. And it's the MMA is funny. Once someone gets punched in the head pretty hard, they start doing odd things, and taking it to the ground is something that usually happens. I mean, in my first fight in the UFC with McDessie there, I took a pretty hard hit, and I shot for the shot myself, right? So.
But being that it's a mixed martial arts contest, do you see that as an advantage? I mean, Erik Koch's a guy that's known to have a good ground game, and you're right, he trains with Ben Askren the odd time out of Milwaukee, but he actually has not shot a single takedown in an MMA fight since 2009. You yourself, obviously you prefer having the fight standing up, but at the same time, you have a vicious ground game. You proved that in that third round against James Krause in your last outing. Do you see it as an advantage to be able to just kind of switch it up on the fly, take the fight to the ground if you need be, but also be very comfortable standing and just being able to throw basically whatever kick you want, knowing that, hey, if it goes to the ground, I'm okay there as well?
Well, of course. I mean, being more dynamic is always going to be a huge benefit. I just learning more new skills and wanting to practice them in competition is a huge reason why I have actually taken some shots and worked on the ground game within fights. I underestimated my ground game in my last fight, and that was a huge mistake. I think if I didn't underestimate my ground game, and more specifically my full mount, I definitely could have finished that fight.
So let me actually take you back to that exact moment. There's about a minute left. You're on his back. You end up in the full mount. At that point, are you thinking to yourself, I just want to maintain the mount position? Because you hear the 10-second clap. That's when you posture up, and it's pretty much like a second or two from being stopped. Did you think to yourself, looking back on that tape, man, I should have just postured up and rained down earlier? Or was it really, I thought in the moment I want to just hold the mount?
Well, no, I definitely didn't just want to hold them out. That's never any sort of thought going through my head. I want to finish every fight I get into. But it was a close fight, and near the end of the fight, I took full mount at about 30 seconds left, but he actually had a quarter guard. So in him having a good ground game, I was a little worried of getting swept. I knew if he had swept me at that point, I definitely lost the fight. So I 100% I needed to finish out on top. But I threw a couple shoulder smashes in guard, or in full mount, which he kind of gave up his quarter guard. And once I felt that he wasn't going to be able to sweep me there, then I wanted to really rain down the ground and pound. If I was a little more confident in myself and thought I wouldn't have got swept, about 5 seconds earlier I should have postured up and really rained down. But it's tough. I mean, the constant trying to figure out what is the right thing to do in a split second while someone's trying to kill you is it's a tough game.
Well, that's exactly it. And it comes down to, every moment gives a different opportunity or a different outcome. And in your case, do you look back at all and think to yourself, you're 1-2 in the UFC. The McDessie fight you took on relatively short notice. Your second fight in the UFC, you come in as an underdog. You have a spectacular performance and put on a great win over a former tough champion. And then your last fight with James Krause, I mean, he's a proven commodity that's been in the UFC for a while now. You had an excellent and a very close fight with him. I mean, it could have gone your way even without the finish in the third round, but you almost did finish. Now you're 1-2 in the UFC. By most people's standards, you're doing fantastic in the octagon. But you look at a training partner in Matt Dwyer, a guy that you work with, and I thought he was looking great in the UFC as well. And, unfortunately, a couple bad bounces go his way, and he gets released. Coming into this Erik Koch fight, do you feel like you have your job is secure, or do you feel like you almost got to go and do something, not spectacular, but you almost got to do something extra because your back's against the wall?
Yeah, most definitely. If I lose this fight, there's a good chance I'll get cut. That doesn't really change much of anything of how I'm taking the fight. In the UFC, or we're out of the UFC, I'm going to be fighting for quite a while unless I get a serious injury. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of benefits to being in the UFC, and I definitely do not want to get cut. But I'm not going to allow that to weigh too heavy on my mindset going into any fight.
Now, I want to ask you about injuries real quick. You brought it up. Erik Koch's a guy that coming into this fight with yourself, he's been on the shelf for 2 years. So a lot of people always talk about ring rust being a big factor. How much of a factor do you think that plays into a fight? Because, I mean, realistically, you've been fighting since you were a teenager, and you really haven't had much than, 7 months off between fights most?
Yeah, I think my longest period was 9 months due to a serious knee injury.
Is would you say that's the biggest injury you've had in your career? Like, how do you stay in good physical condition between all these camps?
Oh, I'm usually not in good physical condition. In my 3 UFC fights, 2 of them I had decent injuries that many other people might not have taken a fight with. Again, these are things that when the time comes to actually step in that octagon, I can't allow that to play on my head.
Well, I mean, between MMA and Muay Thai, you're coming up on 100 fights now?
Oh, just about, yeah.
Just about that mark.
Very exciting.
Got to almost wrapping up here, but speaking of Matt Dwyer, so he's got a fight coming up with a former foe of yours, Jesse Ronson, I believe on June 8th on the XFFC card. Helping him get ready, is it almost bittersweet having to watch on the sidelines as a training partner gets in there and fights a guy like Ronson, or is a part of you almost like, you know what, I wish I could get that one back?
I definitely want to get every loss I've ever had back, but for me, I don't care who I fight leading up to it, and once I fought that person, my mind is past that, and for Dwyer to fight him, I don't really have a serious want for him to beat him or hurt him just because I had lost to him in the past.
Now, final question for you. I mean, you're what I would consider to be a pretty big lightweight. I mean, you stand 6 feet tall. You've competed in the past at welterweight, and I mean, a lot of catch weights of 160 pounds as well. Now that there's this IV ban going on, now that a lot of guys are looking to kind of change weight classes, do you anticipate a move back to 170 pounds in the future, or can you still comfortably make 155? I hear you're making steaks as we speak, so it can't be all that bad.
I mean, I can definitely make 155, and I feel comfortable doing it. If the UFC really enforces an 8% body law, 8% body weight loss, that's gonna play a huge factor. And I don't know if I'll be able to do, because that'll give me about 12 pounds. I have to be the whole week being down before the fight, and that's a little bit tougher. I can easily make 155. I feel comfortable, and that's great, but the amount of water, I do cut about 13, 14 pounds of water kind of in the last 24 to 48 hours. With an 8% rule, that is going to make it very tough, and I might have to go up to 170.
Well, regardless where you fight, you're always putting on entertaining scraps and performances in there. So very much appreciated for taking the time. Shaolin Shane Campbell back in action, UFC Fight Night 88. That is on May 29th, taking on Erik Koch. Once again, thanks for taking the time, Shane.
My pleasure.